Hello, welcome everyone. We'll just give it a few more minutes and wait for people to arrive. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just give it one more minute and then we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I think we've started to slow down a little bit with people coming in, so I think we should just get started. Hello, I am Helena Smart and I am a Sector Development Manager for the National Archives. Today I'm going to chair this session and I'm really excited to do so. It is the first event in our Research Roots series, and I just wanted to say a little bit about myself before we jump into that. So I'm Helena, I am a woman in my 50s, I'm wearing glasses today and a pink and black dress. I have shoulder length hair, which is sort of reddish brown. So as I say, welcome. First in the series for Research Roots, and today's topic is, today's title is Feels Like Home, Place-Based Belonging and Curating with Communities. And that's with Dr. Aisling O'Boyle, Senior Lecturer at the Centre for Language Education Research at Queen's University Belfast. So welcome. So the first in our new annual event series, which encourages audiences to engage with collections in new and innovative ways. We will explore the possibilities for research, consider methodologies and practices that reach beyond traditional practice and outputs. Our 2025 Research Roots programme, the theme of that is emotions, senses and feelings in the archives, and it examines ways in which we navigate the archives, how we feel our way through, and how closely entwined we are with our own emotions and senses when dealing with archives. So that's the theme of this, and before we get into the presentation, a little bit of housekeeping. So we aim for this session to finish at 2 today, so just an hour. We'll begin with the presentation from Dr. O'Boyle, followed by a very short conversation between myself and Aisling, where we'll sort of explore some questions. We're also encouraging people today to put their own questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So we're running this through Zoom, and we've got a sort of ready set up Q&A function, so please do use it. You don't need to wait till the end. You can just pop your questions in as they come to you as the presentation progresses. I've got very helpful colleagues on the call, which will be sharing guidance and can also help you if you've got any technical issues, so please just reach out to them. This event is being recorded today and it will be available on YouTube as well in due course. We've enabled live captions and you can access these at the bottom of your screen. You can do this by clicking on live transcript, show subtitle, or alternatively, if you find it a bit distracting, you can just turn them off by following the same steps. Okay, so that's the housekeeping. So we at the National Archives, we regularly work with community organisations, and we try and, as much as we can, creatively open up our collections to involve communities in our practice and to really ensure that archives are for everyone. So I want to use this opportunity today to highlight a new community-led research project, Spaces, Places and Belonging. Some of you may have heard it referred to as the Community Hub. It is very new. It is funded by the AHRC, and it's very much a collaborative project with the Community Archives and Heritage Group, with Leeds Museum and the National Library of Wales. So I just wanted to flag it today because there is a webinar coming up on the 17th, Wednesday the 17th, and it's got full details of this new research and sort of grant funding programme, Spaces, Places and Belonging, and there'll be a Q&A in the chat. So I'm very excited to be speaking today with Dr. Aisling O'Boyle, academic partner for the Lisburn Museum Migrant Research Project, and that project was titled Yours, Mine and Ours. It was funded by the Centre of Cultural Values Collaborative Fund, and Yours, Mine and Ours aim to develop sustainable collaborative relationships with local migrant communities. It was a way of enabling participants to take the lead and to share their own stories. So we're going to hear from Aisling on how the project sought ways to reflect the experience of these communities within the museum's own collections, within their archives and their exhibition programme. Then Aisling and I will discuss the social role of museums and archives collaborating with communities, how they foster cultural inclusion and enhance that feeling of belonging. So Aisling, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Helena, and thank you very much to the team at the National Archives for this wonderful invitation. And thank you who are joining today. Much appreciated. And I hope this will be some time well spent for you. I'm just going to start sharing my screen, I hope. Hopefully you should be able to see that. Can you see that? Can I just check if colleagues can see? Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. That's great. Oh, sorry, Helena. Just
yep. If you could pop it into presenter mode.
Yep. All right, bear with me a second.
Yep.
Remember when this worked 2 minutes ago?
2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Oh, I'll try this again. Sorry. Yeah, this one. Yeah. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Super, thanks very much. As I said, many thanks for joining. My name is Aisling O'Boyle. I'm a lecturer here at the School of Social Sciences, Education, Social Work at Queen's University Belfast. I had the great pleasure and fortune of being the academic partner on this project, the Yours, Mine and Ours, a shared authority project with local migrant communities, with my colleague, Dr. Colette Brownlee, who was Educational Services Officer at the Irish Linen Centre and Lisburn Museum. We were also supported by my colleagues here at Queen's University Belfast, Professor Owen Purdue at the Centre of Public History and Professor Tony Gallagher. As Helena mentioned there, this partnership research project was awarded a grant in 2023 And it was part of the Centre for Cultural Value Collaborate Fund at University of Leeds, which attempts to, and does very well, supports innovative partnerships between cultural sector organisations and academics around underexplored questions concerning cultural value. And Lisburn Museum and this Yours, Mine and Ours project was selected as one of 5 funded projects from over 200 applications from across the UK. Our intention with this project was to try to establish, as Helena had said, sustainable collaborative relationships to support what we would refer to as non-user migrant communities in Lisburn and Castlereagh in this local area to become involved in their local museum. My role was as the academic partnership on that, and so I am not a museum educator. I am an educator. I am a social scientist, and very much interested in themes of migration, interested in different communities working together in new environments. One of the aims as the academic partner on this was to be able to provide a knowledge base upon which further social engagement projects could continue, and also to track the progress and see what other museums, what other institutions, what other people could learn from this project. I'm going to move forward. So the photographs that you see here are part of the history of the project that was taken as we went along. And as you see, one of the important things that we wanted to do with this project was to develop an impact toolkit for museums. We were interested in the wonderful work that museums do and the wonderful community work that some museums do and the potential for that work. And therefore we wanted to be able to share our learning with everyone else to hopefully make an impact and to be able to trace impact of that cultural value. My colleague, Dr. Colette Brownlee, who, as I mentioned, is the museum educator, had earlier on developed this shared authority pedagogy of the real approach to museum education. And that really formed the model for our work together. The model that Colette had produced, the shared authority model, was centered around pedagogy of the real, and Colette talks about pedagogy of the real as being working with real objects, real staff, and real participants to generate mutual benefit. And this is the model that she has used for a number of years at Lisburn Museum and at the Irish Linen Centre. As you can see from this pictures, you can see people hard at work. You can see people working together, and somewhere in the background of those photographs, you can see myself and Colette. And we very much were heavily involved in this project and working together with participants. And so it really was where we took decisions together. We didn't make any decisions on our own. We worked together as the groups that you can see here to decide on what it is that the project was going to do and how it was going to come about. Just to give you some further information about the project and what we were really intending to do. What we wanted to bring people together was to bring them together for an experience in a museum, alongside myself as an academic researcher, gathering data on that experience, gathering information about processes that worked, and hopefully being able to then put those together into a particular framework and toolkit that would be of use whenever museums and perhaps other institutions would be thinking about belonging and cultural inclusion. So part of the creative aspects of this Yours, Mine and Ours project involved groups of people coming together in the museum to create their own artifacts. Just to give you an example of the shared authority of that, our original idea was that we would ask groups would come together to work on a collaborative quilt. And we very quickly realized that the groups that we were working with, the participants that we were working with, that wasn't anything of interest to them. Quilts as the artifact wasn't a particular thing that they were interested in. So we changed it to things that were of interest to them. The important aspect was about the opportunity to create an artifact which would become a permanent part of the permanent collection in Lisburn Museum. So whether it was a quilt, whether it was a piece of ceramics, whether it was a piece of textiles, whatever it was, we wanted to leave that open and for that to be, the authority was there from the participants to make that change. So part of what the experience was, in order for participants to create their own artifacts, was getting them into the museum. So Colette has many years as a museum educator, working with people and engaging them in museum work. And what we did was provide an authentic welcome and a bespoke program for their time in the museum, which really was designed to be integral to encouraging this sense of well-being, to address feelings of isolation and exclusion, in order to examine ideas around placemaking through this project. For those of you who may not be overly familiar with the geography or the geopolitical context here, so Northern Ireland is a relatively small place. It has a population of less than 2 million people. And over the last 10 years, our population has diversified in a number of ways through migration, and different populations are now part of the local communities. And part of what the Lisburn Museum wanted to do was to be able to see, well, what about new communities, as they were so called? What about new and perhaps more later settled communities? How do they feel they belong in some of these very established institutions? So just before I move on to give you a little bit more detail about what we learned from the project, I want to just as part of our shared authority approach, is that this is not my research. This is not Colette's research. This is a collaboration, and it is a collaboration with the groups that we worked with. So for the Yours, Mine and Ours project, we had two main community partners, one of which was the Bulgarian Association of Northern Ireland, and the second was the Shelter Northern Ireland Refugee Housing Support, who were absolutely intrinsic to this project, to everything that happened in it, from the discussions on the formats to the sessions that we would run, and also to the development of the toolkit that I'll show you hopefully in a moment of time. So we absolutely, this would not have been possible without that genuine collaborative approach and taking that very firm stance on a shared authority. Just to give you a sort of further indication around the context in which this project happened, it was always our intention with this project to have a launch of, at the end of the project, to have a celebration event. And our celebration event actually coincided with a terrible summer here in Northern Ireland in 2024, where we were in the middle of racist and xenophobic riots in Northern Ireland and obviously in other places. And so this was the context in which we were working in, and we did hold our event in the summer, albeit smaller perhaps than we had intended, but very much this is the context in which we were working. So it's a shared authority approach. We have groups who are heavily involved, beyond participation, taking authority, having ownership of this. And so certainly it's important for me then to mention colleagues like Palima from the Bulgarian Association, Mohammed from Shelter, and together with colleagues in the Lisburn Museum as well. Okay, so, oops, sorry. One of the, as my role, just say a little bit, given the focus for research roots here, a little bit about my role on the project was very much to gather data. And data was quite specific, and we didn't want it to be something that was, depersonalized or something that was objectified. I was part of this project, and therefore I was a participant here. And so we looked at different methods, different ways of gathering data on our group's experiences of life in Northern Ireland, on experiences of participating in this project, and experiences of participating in museum activities. I want to just show you some of our data, if you like, from just to give you a sense of what it is that we, if you like, found. And it's important that I do share the things that we found, because it was in these findings that we were then able to develop together this toolkit, which we hope would be of benefit for museum educators and museum practitioners for their own, thinking about their own exhibitions, thinking about their own institutions and inclusion therein. So one of the things I'd like to point out, time permitting, is around our case studies. So we thought about, and very much this was help with colleagues at the Centre for Cultural Value, and thinking about what we learnt from doing our project for ourselves, and how that learning could help inform the toolkit and help inform our own understandings. So one example, just to give you an example, we worked with the groups through workshop settings. And so we wanted to know, what's the story of this? So our story was, right, everybody's in a lovely room in a museum. Children are running around, people can come and go as they so wish. And we had different groups participating in different workshops at different times of the year. One of the things that were important for us, and I hope we'll come back to this a moment later, was that this was very dedicated space. The workshops were held in the museum when the museum was actually closed to everyone else. So it was very welcoming space. There were food, there were refreshments, so people could feel, as much as possible, people could feel very comfortable about coming in and taking part, being part of these workshops. So one of the things that we did want to find out about was participants' feelings about, the group's feelings about inclusion and belonging and the role of museums. And it was really interesting the way that participants talked about their role. They were saying, well, yes, you're trying to find out about our culture, so you can put it in a museum. Really interesting here, and we can hopefully can talk a little bit more about the idea of yours, or your, mine, yours, and ours. What we did hear from our groups who were part of the programme were about how they wanted to be accepted, how they wanted to see themselves in the museums in some way. There were also very different stories about having a migrant background living in Northern Ireland. And through our walk and talk sessions, where I walked around the museum exhibits, talking to different groups and individuals about their experiences of living in Northern Ireland, and also about how they wanted to see themselves. And so we collected bits and pieces of data. So we collected recordings from walk and talk sessions, recorded observations, and we also recorded how the pieces were made, how these artifacts were then made. A little bit, just if I may, take one moment for this, a little bit about, from our learning case study, was about what did participants, what did the groups think about museum-based experiences? And we asked them fairly obvious questions. Do you feel connected to the museum? Well, no, I'm not from here, not yet. So we have this indication that this is something that there is movement and there is a possibility for transformation around. And they were very open with us in their experiences. This is very much reflective of Colette Brownlee's approach on shared authority, is that when people come into the museum, they can explore, they can feel, they can touch, they can ask, and feel free to do so. Part of what the reflection upon our learning from our case studies were about what seemed to be essential in order for people to feel part of a community, in order for people to see themselves as belonging to a community, or at least beginning to understand the belonging in a community. we looked at the different ways in which people did that, and we saw that there were particular phases as we worked with our groups, particular phases and different types of activity in each of those phases. What struck us as quite significant was the need to mediate understandings of museums and to mediate the meaning of museums to our group's lives. Why would I go to a museum? What's in it for me? Am I allowed to go there? Should I go there? So there was mediation required, and Colette talked very much about this when we were in these workshops, is that you have to give a little piece of yourself. So a little bit of shared understanding, a little bit of shared identities, a little bit of giving something for people to see that this is how one can become part of, but one can become part of the artifacts that are presented within the museum. And this went a long way really to how our groups, how our participants produced the artifacts that they did. So a number of them decided to produce portraits, self-portraits. Others didn't. Others produced clay artifacts. And so one of the learnings for us was really about the mediation and the interaction of the museum spaces, which were incredibly important. Of course, coming from an academic perspective, one of the things that seemed to be incredibly important here was not only the research and the practice, but also the different knowledges that were created. And so we based quite a lot of our understanding and our discussions drawing upon different perspectives on place-based belonging. And we didn't limit ourselves to just one particular discipline. I have the beauty of being in an interdisciplinary school where I have sociology colleagues nearby. I am in education. I have social work colleagues and so on. And so that sense of, in order to understand place-based belonging, we need transdisciplinary ideas. We need to draw on different perspectives. But also in that, we wanted to position our participants' knowledge as valuable as anything that we might read perhaps in a journal article or we might read in a book. We wanted to place them both very much central, front and center. So just very, I think I've got a couple of moments left. So we built all that together, and you can see here from these photographs, I hope, this is us sitting around the table with some members from the different groups there. You can see what it's like. We're in the middle of a museum. We're surrounded by, books and artifacts, and behind you might not see, but we're exhibitions on behind. There's food on the table and there's things to drink. And we talked about how we would encourage people to come into a museum in a meaningful way that would mean that they would come back, and that museum would become an institution, that were a place there they felt that they belonged. And so we developed this toolkit, which is available for everyone to use, to think about how museum educators, museum practitioners can create spaces around and with their exhibitions, which can best or better or try to or think about ways of promoting cultural inclusion. And we looked at it through these phases of engagement, very much, thinking about coming into somebody's house. And that's really where we brought this in from, where we looked at stepping in. So how do we get people to step into museum spaces? When they're in, what's important? Well, the really important thing is, let me show you around. What we really also, particularly for cultural inclusion, for senses of belonging, was the idea that there is a phase of engagement where anyone coming in should be at home, from whatever that may mean. Make yourself at home, sit down, have a cup of tea, whatever it might be. Part of establishing a connection to the place was about making something. And so whether that was making a conversation, whether it was making play, whether it was making an artifact, it was really important. And it is, we think there's a really important aspect that's not just walk in, walk out. when you're there, you've got to feel at home, and you've got to do something, you've got to make something, you've got to connect in some way, whenever that may be. And one of the really important, and I think probably difficult aspects, is around coming back. When are you coming back? So we're not just, celebrating you being there. We want to know when you're coming back. And so those phases of engagement really basically formed the basis of the toolkit. I think we're probably out of time a little bit. I don't know if Helena's going to stop me at the moment, but just to kind of, within the toolkit, I'll just show you just very briefly, if that's all right. The toolkit, we hope to make it as easy and accessible as possible. So we looked at when you're thinking about a stepping in phase, as museum educators, practitioners, you might want to ask yourselves these questions. You might want to put yourself in the position of the person who doesn't want to step in. And so we always, in each one of these phases, we think about asking questions of ourselves as before we even begin anything around the exhibition in particular, or the museum in particular. Let me show you around. We wanted to demonstrate this with some words from our participants, where when you show people around and they've stepped in, show around, they then talk and they say things like, oh, that guy in the picture is a bit creepy, or whatever it might be. Again, so thinking about the stepping in and thinking about the showing you around, you can see how those do need mediation. They need, and this is, wonderful museum educators do this, and wonderful museum practitioners do this, about showing people around in a way that really does engage people and makes them talk and think and be at ease. Making yourself at home. Can I sit? Can I touch? One of the things that participants in the group talked a little bit about was, you can't underestimate the impact of a cup of tea somewhere. Now, I'm not saying you have, travel around the museum with a cup of tea in your hand. I don't mean that, of course not. But there is something about tea being available. This aspect of creating, listening, talking, connecting, some way, some activity about connections, some way that again can be mediated. And thinking about, museums undoubtedly have lots of different ways that they are already doing that, and it might be interesting to share some of the ways in which different museums and locations assist and facilitate visitors to do that, beyond maybe writing a comment in the book at the end, something a bit beyond that. And then this, when are you coming back? Part of our role in this project, part of what our project intended to do, was to sustain relationships and to get people coming back. And that was part of why we wanted to hold the event in the summer, was to get people to come back in. And they did. And we were really grateful for them. And I hope if you have a time later on or sometime to watch the video of the day, it really was, I think the video was lovely, but it really did capture the sense of the event, which, as I mentioned, did take place in a very difficult socio-political moment in summer 2024. Okay, I'll stop there. I think I'm over my time. I apologise. The toolkit is absolutely available. You can get it from the Centre for Cultural Value website. You can get it from Queen's website. And if you have any questions at all, I'm more than happy to answer them. Or if you want to contact me after this presentation or at any time, please feel free to do so. Just to let you know, we did then take the toolkit and we piloted the toolkit during our summer. So that's something that will be forthcoming then whenever we just finish our write-up with that. And here's just a screenshot from the video. So if you do have a moment, just to 2 minutes long, so just if you want to in your own time, have a look through that. And there's some brilliant photographs of what it's like in the museum, and the Irish Linen Centre is a great place if you ever are around and want to come. So thank you very much, most appreciated, and I'm very happy to have this conversation now with Helena.
Oh, thanks very much. Thank you. Lots and lots of interesting questions coming your way in the chat, which is fantastic. But just to let people sort of take a breath and think about their own questions that they can also add into the chat. I had a couple for you that we, just throughout the presentation and a chat that we had earlier. Actually, one of the criticisms sometimes that I hear from communities who are engaging with heritage organisations is it can be quite piecemeal. And people think, well, when the agenda changes or when the funding runs out, quite often sometimes it's those projects that get dropped. Um, so could you talk a little bit about how the toolkit can be used to make a case for this to make this work part of core funding, really? Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much, Helena. That was absolutely one of the problems we had that actually instigated this research in the first instance. Was we had a great museum sector here in Northern Ireland, and very often people would recognise that museums did really great work in terms of histories of conflict, in terms of public history, in terms of connecting communities. But it was on a hand-to-mouth very much basis of piecemeal, of not supporting. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to gather evidence from our own experience of working with government organizations or government departments, was the need for evidence. And so part of our plan was that people could use this toolkit to gather evidence. So they could bring in the kind of evidence that policymakers, for example, or budget holders would want to see. And we hope we did a little bit of this, be able to, within the toolkit, there are made explicit very many ways in which we can assess the value of an experience. There's no one size fits all. I think that's what's really important, is that different museums will be set up in different contexts and they will be prioritizing different goals. And so we can't say that one particular method is better than another, because it will be dependent upon the particular context. But all that aside, I think one of the benefits is that if we have a toolkit, doesn't have to be this one, although I might say it should be this one, that if everyone is using the same one, then that becomes a way that we can pull the learning from a number of different projects, local museums, perhaps maybe only 100 visitors, whatever. But actually, once that is pulled using the same methods from another one and from another one, we can begin to build up a large body of evidence based on small and bespoke, that actually is it stamps very firmly the kind of impact that the museum sector and cultural sectors actually can have. So I suppose one of them is, first of all, we show different ways in which we can gather evidence, and then ways in which we might want to kind of pull that and come together. But yes, it's very, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great, thank you. Because it's a problem, I think, when it is piecemeal. We've got quite a lot of questions in the chat, so what I might do is just maybe sort of go over to some of those questions, if you don't mind, and then if we've got time we can come back but let's move over. So it's a really nice opening question from Sarah. How did you initially approach the communities you worked with?
So very good. And this was one of the other things that I suppose I should have said, Helena, an answer to the other question was about relationships, is about to avoid piecemeal, we have to keep sustaining the relationships, and that can be done with and without funding, and better with funding because people are recognized for the work that they do and they are well supported to do it. So we took a two-pronged approach really to the communities. I myself, from a language education background, had worked with a number of different refugee and migrant and asylum seeking organizations. Colette Brownlee, who was a museum educator, had also worked with a number of different local community organisations in other projects. And so what we did was to try to cover all our bases. So we asked all of our contacts there, is this something that you would be interested in? Would you like to do this? Some didn't reply. Some said, yes, we'd love to. Some said, yes, we want to know more about it. Some said, yes, we'd love to, signed up and then never appeared. And all of that is okay. That's entirely okay. But that is how we established, that's how we went about it, Sarah. We made contact with the people that we knew, which had been built up over a number of years. But also we had new people coming in who were, well, we can't do it, but have you tried such and such? And so there were referrals that way as well. But they weren't through like individual people. It were groups, organizations, local organizations, voluntary organizations. Sometimes they were just groups with no particular formal status or anything. But that's how we did.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Beautiful work is the next comment. Did you experience resistance from the wider organisation in fostering this sense of belonging? And they've given an example of anxieties from other teams about under-engaged groups becoming at home in the organisation.
So I think this is for Colette Brownlee, the museum educator, is the person who would be best placed to answer that. But I do know what Colette might say, in that the project was very well supported from Lisburn Museum, very, very well supported. And Colette might not like me saying this, but it's through Colette and her years of working with other groups in shared authority projects that Colette had worked with different organisations, so those involved in conflict in Northern Ireland, those involved in different backgrounds. And so Colette herself had a very good history of working with different, if you like, marginalised groups. And so therefore, this was just not the next group, but the group who needed quite a lot of engagement, and definitely the museum and the council were very much behind this particular project. Whether other communities felt, well, why are they engaged and we're not engaged? We didn't hear any of that, and that might well be the case. But one of the things we did to counter that was to make sure that the summer open day that we talked about, or the summer welcome day, we invited as many people as we could. And some people who perhaps had said no thanks to the research actually came in and had a stall had a table as part of the day. So trying to make everything as inclusive as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I mean, just the next question, again, it's just because this was an academic project working alongside like heritage organisations, was there any challenges, and how did you navigate any challenges?
Yes, there were loads of challenges, and I'm not sure that's just because it was different organisations working together. But I have to say that one of the ways that we were really strongly supported through the challenges was through the kind of mentorship with the Centre for Cultural Value. They really did drop in and support us when we needed. So yes, there were plenty of challenges. I mean, as I said, the biggest challenge we had was this wonderful day we had organised, and we were going to land it in the middle of riots happening across Northern Ireland, which we knew we had no prediction about what way that could possibly go. Challenges, number one challenge was groups are going to say, no thanks, we're not interested in this. And luckily that's we did work very hard at pulling and asking people to come in and making sure that people, when they were in, felt really comfortable. And so that was definitely a challenge. Different speeds, universities, academic, some of the bureaucracy moves at a very different speed to some non-academic organizations. So, cultural sector organizations super fast at getting everything done in terms of that. But I think one of the ways that we counteracted all challenges was a really strong lines of communication between myself and Colette. You know, we would go down and, you know, meet each other in the museum. We would Zoom, we would stay in contact and be really open. I think is, you know, oh, this is not working. Oh no, we said we can't make a quilt. What are we going to do? You know, keeping it really open. But yes, challenges always.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, further down in the question, someone does ask about, let me just find it. It was, did you find there was a language barrier? And could participants speak English? Did you need an interpreter? And I thought that was quite interesting as another, I'm
Yes,
guessing this would have been thought about in the project inception.
yes, yes. Yes, we had interpreters, and yes, sometimes we had, if you like, advocates who came along with particular members, who provided some interpretation at times and translation at times. So yes, we made that very clear when we were inviting people who wanted to come along to be part of the group, that would not, it should not be a barrier to them coming in. One of the things, one of the really interesting things that happened, as a result of this awareness of, like, you know, people speak lots of different languages, and just because you're from one country doesn't mean you're actually, you know, there were, you know, we encountered that where, you know, there was an assumption that someone would speak this particular language because they were from a certain country, but actually they didn't. They had another first language. And what that did was really to raise awareness of, you know, how useful are the, you know, in walking around the museum, how useful was the, you know, information sheet in Spanish and French only, you know. And so what happened then was the Lisbon Museum then invested in multilingual resources for the museum, and multilingual resources, and they're beautiful. I should have shared a screenshot. All there, lots and lots of languages, and also they created a drop down banner for the front hall, with welcome in lots and lots of different languages. Now that in and of itself, we know it's not, you know, it's not going to, you know, it's not going to, you know, suddenly make everything understandable, but it is an indication of, actually, it's a recognition that there are more than, you know, more than English is happening here. We recognize that.
Yeah, because that was one of the questions that I had. It was just how the work, how the practice of the practice of the museum curators had changed, and one of my questions was, did they change their signage? Did they change how evaluation was captured? You know, did they, you know, was there anything around that, Aisling, that they changed?
Yes, certainly for our, that was one of the, when we were putting together the pilot, or the collecting data on the impact of the actual summer event. We worked with the organization, said, look, you know, the worked with the groups and said, should we have this in multiple languages? And they said, well, yes, if you use this particular format, it'll do it automatically. To translate across. So if people want to give the responses, they can give it in whatever languages they want to. Now, obviously, that assumes that everybody then is literate if they're being able to read the questions and whatnot, that are available through the automatic and multilingual translation. But yes, that certainly was something to think about.
Yeah, no, thanks. Somebody moved to John's question. He has a question: how open were you about the phases, sorry, and frameworks you're putting participants through, so to speak? I wonder if there's ever a tension between transparency and shared authority, and subtle management of interactions to support both research and participants themselves. Thank you.
Yes, no, great. No, absolutely. That's, you know, we shouldn't assume that because shared authority, shared means everything's positive and it works completely, you know, everything is equal all the way around. I mean, clearly it's not, because the project had an idea of itself before it came. People were being invited, and through the regular processes of research, we had to ask people to fill in consent forms. So it felt, you know, felt like they were giving something away, and I didn't fill in a consent form. So yes, I think it's, I really do think it is incumbent upon um, um, those who start this shared authority approach of, to be really clear about the roles and responsibilities. And one of the things that Colette had put together was a user agreement, a learner agreement, where that was all in place, where very clearly it was, here's the expectations, here's what we all expect from each other. But absolutely, what's interesting is that I think the actual toolkit changed a lot more because of the input, because of the contributions from the participants than I had anticipated. I thought they might say, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, okay, yeah, okay," but they didn't. They said, "Oh no, we need more of that, and we need less of that." And I was really happy that they did feel that there was that their own authority. But undoubtedly, it's something that one has to always keep an eye on. It's not always not, the world is ill, David, as my mother used to say, and that comes across through everything. So yeah.
Thank you. So Natalie, thank you very much for your very informative talk. Do you have any tips for people who are trying to create funded, co-curated shared authority projects where the objectives, journey or outputs may change? The lack of concrete outputs impact can sometimes be difficult. Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks, Natalie.
Yeah. So we, and it wasn't me, it was colleagues in the museum sector had identified the Collaborate Fund as the place which would be best, was the place that had the infrastructure supports around connecting academic colleagues with practitioner colleagues. And I don't know if I'm not sure it's running for another cohort, but it was an absolutely brilliant model in my experience. An absolutely brilliant model where someone took care of the matchmaking, if you like, and someone took care of the administration around that, and someone said, look, here is some money and you can use it. So I think more of those funds would be really, really important. And I think it's probably, necessary for us to shout a bit more about how important they are. In terms of the outputs, one of the things, that myself and Colette struggled a bit with was, what kind of output do we want? Well, we want this toolkit to be available. One of the other things we really wanted but didn't get and didn't have enough money for was to have a web-based, an online platform. That's what we really wanted. And so people could easily share different outputs, aggregate outputs, and work well. But I think before that might happen, I think just making things publicly available, not behind any not behind a journal article or journal publication. I think just making things as open access as they can be. I'm not sure, Helena, does that answer that question? I don't know if I've missed.
I think so. Yeah. I think that's fine. There's an interesting one here from Bethany. It says, so when people were contributing their own artefact to the museum, was it based on anything? Did you ask them to bring something that they felt represented their identity or their community or something else? And maybe Ashley, maybe an example of what people brought along. I would love to hear that.
Brilliant. We didn't ask people to bring anything along themselves. But what happened was people brought stuff. So some people just sort of appeared, and that was them. And then because we were having regular meetings, then the next time that we saw them, they would bring some things. So just to give you an example, obviously it's the Irish Linen Museum, lots and lots of linen and textiles around in the displays. And what the Bulgarian Association of Northern Ireland did was actually to donate a number of different textiles that they had, again, to put it into the permanent collection. They weren't asked to do that. When we were taking part in the workshops, we did use our own artifacts. Colette used her ring and said, oh, this ring's really important to me. I want to tell you why it's really important to me. When we were doing stuff around identity work and identities work. So that's one example of where the Bulgarian group brought in pieces of linen and donated them to to the museum. They also, with the artist, the groups made their own. So they made their own clay flowers. They made their own self-portraits. And as we then moved through time, we also had, for some of the events that we had the different groups bringing in their own clothes. Say, look, this is actually a wedding garment from my wedding. I want to show you. I want to put it on display for the purposes of this event. Take it home afterwards, and that's totally fine. But yes, I mean, I think, you know, lots of things to be done there around objects and the significance of objects. But no, we didn't ask them to. I mean, what was interesting was that Colette wanted them very firmly to engage with the objects that were there. She wanted them to touch the museum stuff.
Yeah.
That's
Thanks. There's a question from Arif on that sort of, was there a difference in the way that, you know, the engagement process for archive documents as opposed to those artifacts as well? Were the processes different?
so. I mean, I'm not a museum educator, so I'm going to have to sort of refer to somebody else's expertise. What, as an observer, and as when we were doing our walk and talks, some artifacts, some items were behind glass cabinets, some weren't. Some were available to touch, some were recommended for touch. Some of them you didn't know whether you were supposed to touch them or not. And what was really interesting is through the walk and talks, people stopped at the items they were most interested in. Part of what happens in the Lisburn Museum is there is an actual working loom, an actual spinning wheel. And so a lot of the participants did sit down and make their own. They spun some flax and they made some thread. But in terms of the archive material, it came out, the stuff that came out from the archives was there to be touched and to be played with, if you like. I am more than certain that there would not be, you know, objects that could not possibly have happened with. They didn't come out.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So I'm getting conscious of time now. It's flown past, so we've got 3 minutes left. We'll maybe take one more question, and then we'll just sort of wrap up. So I think it's a good one from Luke. Curious to hear how the museum managed the relationship with the existing museum communities, and how this introduction of other communities into the fold has impacted.
I think that's a brilliant question, and the short answer is I don't know. And I think that's really does require the further follow-on work. Part of what we had always envisaged at the beginning of this project, that it would become part of a further project. And certainly that's something that colleagues who are here as part of the university, as part of a university that has a sense of being an anchor institution of where it is. Part of the partnership model is very much to try to follow that through. But again, sometimes we're in the same position of, well, where's the funding from it? Where's the resource going to come to be able to do that? But I think, first of all, the will is there. The will of the institutions is there to work with that. But I think that's that's what we need to find out more. Look, I really do. You know, what is the impact beyond the individual, the impact with the other communities? And I think that's really important because, you know, going back to the idea of the quilt was suggested because it had worked with other communities, other marginalized groups, or other, you know, diverse groups of people. Everybody did a quilt and the quilt was there. But this particular project, those who decided to participate didn't want to do a quilt. That's totally fine, you know. So how the other groups linked to the museum feel about that, I think it's a great question, and I don't know, and that's brilliant. So if anybody wants to do research on that, really happy, please go ahead.
And that's what we want. We want more research. So that's great. It's a nice way, I think, to wrap up the Q&A session. And I'm sorry for those that we haven't got to today, but I'm sure we've got a note of the questions, Aisling, and if you've got a response to them, we can get those responses back to you.
Yes, very happy to.
Yeah, that's great. It's just left for me really to say thanks very much for joining us and providing insight into this incredible work. And thanks to the audience for being so cooperative and asking such good questions. I've loved this last hour. Um, just to say that the team behind this series have created a resource pack based on this session, which includes information, links to organisations and funding streams. And you can find that link on the Research Roots webpage and in the chat. So just a little plug, we have 5 more Research Roots events coming up, and the next session is Queer Places, Feelings, Emotions and Ways of Rebuilding Intangible Heritage. And that will take place this month on the 23rd of September. So we hope you've been inspired by our Research Roots series to engage with collections in new ways and just really think about feelings and collaborations. So have a good week, everyone. Thanks again, Aisling. I have loved this conversation. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
now. Have a good
Goodbye.
week.
Bye.